Imagine this. You wake up to the sound of chainsaws screaming in the distance. You think it's a neighbor trimming a branch. You grab your coffee, step onto your porch, and then your brain catches up to what your eyes are seeing. Those machines aren't next door. They're on your land, on the deed your uncle left you, the one you thought no one could touch. And while you're still in your pajama pants, you watch a 200-year-old oak, older than your great-grandfather, shudder once and then collapse, like a wounded animal. That was my Thursday. My name is Ethan Cole, and I moved to Maple Ridge Estates in rural Virginia after a brutal divorce. Thinking I was buying peace, I inherited 8 acres from my uncle Walter, a Korean War vet who believed in 3 things: good tools, good wood, and never letting bullies win. His land sat inside a newer subdivision like an island of stubborn freedom. The parcel went all the way back to an 1820s land grant, long before any HOA dreamed of existing, when developers wrapped cookie cutter houses around it in the 80s. His place was technically in the community, but legally its own little country. I moved there with 2 rescue dogs, Rusty the one-eyed hound mix who barks at clouds, and Luna the pit bull who's scared of butterflies. I spent my days building Adirondack chairs, planting tomatoes, doing pro bono ramps as a semi-retired civil engineer, trying to forget courtrooms and lawyers and the sound of doors slamming in anger. Mornings on that wraparound porch felt holy: coffee, pine resin, woodpeckers tapping the dead cedar like tiny jackhammers, and for a while it was enough. Then I met Melody Whitmore, president of the Maple Ridge Community Association, 40-something, platinum blonde bob, G-Wagon with a vanity plate that basically screamed HOA royalty. Real estate agent who'd married up and decided the neighborhood was her kingdom. Her obsession was architectural harmony, which in her language meant everything must look like beige catalog furniture. My historically accurate colonial blue shutters might as well have been graffiti. She hit me with violation notices for paint, my work truck, a bird feeder, even my dogs barking once at a delivery truck. I appealed, brought in documentation from the State Preservation Office. Even the county sided with me, and I watched her smile stay frozen while her knuckles went white around her pen. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't over. It had just started. 6 months later, she unveiled her masterpiece, the Community Connectivity Project, a private shortcut road to save residents about 90 seconds on the way to the golf course. The catch: that road cut straight through the back quarter of my land, through Wildflower Meadow and down toward that ancient oak Uncle Walter used to call the Old Soldier. There was a board vote I was never told about, an email invitation that mysteriously bounced, and at 6:47 a.m. one Thursday, Rusty started that deep, panicked bark that says this is bad. I hit the back door in unlaced boots, no shirt, coffee still in my hand, and saw bulldozers carving a muddy scar through my property. I ran, yelling, waving my arms. The foreman, a guy with Trey on his name patch, climbed down, handed me a clipboard, HOA letterhead, signature of Melody Whitmore at the bottom, board authorized construction. He shrugged, said if I had a problem, take it up with her. By the time I got Oakline Property Management on the phone, they'd already taken 40 feet of meadow. Then one dozer nosed up to the old oak. The blade bit into the trunk, and the sound it made, sharp and final, felt like something inside my chest breaking. I took pictures of everything: tire tracks in the mud, the shredded roots, that massive trunk lying on its side like a fallen giant. Then I drove straight to the courthouse, pulled every record I could find. No easement, no right-of-way, no covenant, no legal permission for anyone to touch 1 inch of my land. A deputy, Deputy Ramos, good guy, coaches Little League, walked the line with me, shook his head, said it was bad, said it was civil, not criminal, told me to get a lawyer, so I did. My attorney, Stuart Hale, looked at the bylaws and pointed at one vague paragraph. Essentially, the board can authorize infrastructure that benefits the community. Shaky language. But the HOA had deeper pockets than I did. I was still rebuilding after the divorce. Then, just to make sure my humiliation was complete, I got served with a lawsuit while I was ladling soup at the food pantry. Melody was suing me for $47,000 for delaying her project. That same week, she posted in the neighborhood Facebook group about one selfish resident harming property values. No names, just enough hints that everyone knew it was me. And overnight, I went from the quiet guy with the dogs to the unstable troublemaker you avoid in the frozen food aisle. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. That was just the end of Act 1. The turning point arrived carrying a casserole. His name was Arthur Bell, 68, retired postal worker with the memory of a sorting machine, one of the only board members who'd voted against the road, which had earned him a citation for a non-compliant mailbox that had stood there for 15 years. He showed up on my porch one night with tuna noodle in a Pyrex dish and a manila folder that ended up changing everything. Inside were 3 years of unredacted HOA meeting minutes, handwritten notes, and little sticky flags where Arthur had marked the truly insane parts. Melody had been funneling money to her brother-in-law's landscaping company, Evergreen Grounds LLC, to the tune of 40 grand above market over 2 years. Notices kept mysteriously bouncing for anyone who disagreed with her. Selective enforcement so blatant it read like parody. Inflatable flamingos and off-season decorations were fine for her. Book club friends, but an elderly neighbor, Mr. Kwan, got slapped with $500 for a single garden gnome. Bullies get sloppy when they think nobody can touch them, Arthur said, sipping my coffee like we'd been doing this for years. You look angry enough to do something about it. And he wasn't wrong. Anger was pretty much the only thing keeping me upright at that point. I filed a formal records request. Under state law in Virginia, HOAs have to cough up financials when members demand them. Melody stalled. I filed a complaint with the State Community Association Oversight Board. 10 days later, the numbers hit my inbox. The road had been budgeted at $78,000. But when I pulled county procurement records, the invoices on file totaled just $52,000. $26,000 had evaporated, and the contractor's LLC listed Melody's real estate firm as its registered agent. She'd been paying herself with HOA money and calling it improvements. That night, something in me went from hurt to surgical. I amended my legal response, filed a countersuit for $150,000, property damage, legal fees, emotional distress, and attached every document. Then I did the one thing she never expected. I dropped all those public records into the community Facebook group with a single line. Transparency matters, you decide. No rant, no insults, just PDFs. Her crowd control evaporated in the comments. People asked why there were 2 budgets, why no competing bids, why the board never saw the real invoices. She yanked my post within an hour, but screenshots had already spread like gasoline on dry grass. 4 days later, she tried to stage a show trial, an emergency conduct hearing at the clubhouse. The agenda said they were considering expelling me from the HOA. They gave me 48 hours notice even though the bylaws say 10 days. I brought Stuart and a legal pad full of her mistakes. Melody had a PowerPoint. Actual cheesy slide transitions, painting me as a liar, a troublemaker, someone filing false reports. She flashed photos of my truck, my police report, my Facebook post, and framed them all as attacks on community harmony. When she finished, I stood up and asked one calm question. Had anyone actually looked at the contractor's insurance certificate? Silence. I handed copies to the board. The policy had expired 11 days before they started the road work. No coverage, no grading permit either. I checked that too. And under state law, unpermitted grading on that scale carries massive daily fines. I did the math out loud, watched faces drain of color. The room went from kick Ethan out to wait. Are we on the hook for this? In about 30 seconds flat. That night in the parking lot, Kelly Morgan, a mom who'd once been denied a swing set because it was visually disruptive, gripped my arm and whispered, "How do we get her out?" I told her the word Arthur had been waiting to hear. Recall, state law said we needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to force a vote. 102 out of 340 houses. We're not stopping at 102. Arthur said later that night at my kitchen table, spreading out his hand-drawn map like we were planning a heist. We go for 150, 200. She's going to fight every name like it was signed under duress in a thunderstorm. Within days, we had a machine running. Arthur handled paperwork. I dug through contracts. Kelly organized a small army of carpool moms in yoga pants who scared me more than any bulldozer crew. People opened their doors with stories already ready. Fines for grass clippings blowing into the street, for a broken garage door, for the wrong color roses. Every petty cruelty had a date and a dollar amount. Then an envelope showed up in my P.O. box. No return address. Inside, foreclosure documents from 2019, Maple Ridge Community Association versus Mrs. Anika Desai. Lot 47, $9,200 in dues and fines, and a note in neat cursive. Ask why she really left. A friend. I found her obituary. Died in assisted living, stress-related complications, 73, and tracked down her son, Vic Desai, through a housing justice group. He told me how Melody's crew had started with a fence 6 inches too tall, the one his mother built herself with a post-hole digger at 70, so she could pray in privacy, how the violations piled up, wildflowers called weeds, a broken garage opener, a bird feeder. Until the HOA took her house. She had a stroke a week after the eviction. He visited her for 2 years while she drifted in and out of recognizing him. And 6 months after that, Melody listed the house and made about $85,000 off. The flip. I hung up the phone a different person. I wasn't just angry about a tree anymore. I was angry on behalf of every Anika who'd ever been crushed because fighting back was too expensive. I called Arthur, told him we weren't just recalling a president. We were flipping the entire board. He said, "Good. I've already started printing extra petitions." We hit 163 signatures in 2 weeks, enough to trigger the recall, enough to scare Melody. She sent her lawyer, Brent Carson, to my doorstep with a settlement. First 10,000, then 25. Replant some trees, cash for my trouble. All I had to do was drop the countersuit and the recall. I thought about legal bills. My daughter Sophie's wish for a vacation that didn't involve fighting over who kept the blender. And then I thought about Mrs. Desai staring at a wall in a nursing home and said, "Tell your client I'll see her at the ballot box." The next morning my truck was keyed from headlight to tailgate. Someone spray-painted liar across my mailbox. Deputy Ramos pulled security footage from Mrs. Nguyen 2 doors down. Clear as day. White pickup, logo for Evergreen Grounds LLC, and Caleb Ross, Melody's brother-in-law, dragging a key and a can of spray paint. He got arrested for vandalism and attempted witness intimidation. Hours later, an anonymous email hit my inbox. Screenshots of texts where Melody told Caleb to scare him. Make him regret this. Just make it stop. We sent those to the DA, to the State Oversight Board, to our entire petition mailing list, and to the neighborhood Facebook group for good measure. Melody called them fake, but the timestamps lined up exactly with the vandalism and the number matched her phone. She'd just put attempted witness tampering in writing. Even then, she had one more dirty card to play. Letters with no return address started circulating. What you don't know about Ethan Cole, half-truths about my divorce, a claim I'd been fired instead of taking early retirement, muttered questions about my stability. One even found its way to Sophie's college mailbox. She called me sobbing, asked if any of it was true, and that nearly broke me more than the chainsaws ever had. And that's when Harold and Linda Pierce stepped out of the shadows they'd been hiding in. Harold, the HOA treasurer, had been Melody's quiet rubber stamp for 4 years. Linda has MS. Their medical bills are a monster. They were the perfect victims for subtle blackmail. One night they sat us down at their kitchen table, hands shaking, and Harold put a USB drive between us like it was radioactive. "These are the real books," he said. "Every fake invoice, every shell company, every dollar she made me hide." Over 4 years, Melody had siphoned roughly $130,000 from the community. He said he'd testify, consequences be damned, because he couldn't sleep another night knowing he'd helped her. We sent those files to the DA, to the state, and to every homeowner. Local reporter Claire Monroe from Channel 7 News picked it up, and the next thing we knew, Melody's real estate license was under investigation, 2 board members resigned, and the recall election was scheduled with a court-ordered neutral firm to count the votes. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just my personal war anymore. This was a case study. Election day hit in late October. Crisp air, blue sky. That kind of sunshine that makes everything feel high definition. The recall vote took place in the same Maple Ridge clubhouse where Melody had once tried to exile me. But this time Deputy Ramos stood at the door in uniform. Official counters sat behind folding tables, and news vans were parked across the street. By opening time there was a line. Retirees, young families, people in work boots, people in office clothes. I saw Frank Dawson, the retired plumber fined for grass clippings, Mrs. Nguyen with her security footage, Kelly with her kids taking selfies by the Vote Here sign. Even Vic Desai had driven in to watch. I filled in my ballot with a steady hand. Yes to recall, yes to a new board slate with my name, Arthur's, Kelly's, and 2 others, and then waited. When the counters came out hours later, the clubhouse was packed. The lead auditor announced 420 eligible voters, 381 votes cast, over 90% turnout, unheard of for an HOA. And then she read the numbers. 289 yes to recall, 92 no. The room erupted. People clapped. Some cried. Someone started chanting, out, out, out. I glanced over at Melody, standing against the wall in a navy dress and pearls like she was running for office. Her face was porcelain, but her eyes were pure panic. For a second, I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered Mrs. Desai, Mr. Kwan, Frank, Harold shaking hands, and that ancient oak split open at my feet. The pity died quietly. They announced the new board. Ethan Cole, Arthur Bell, Kelly Morgan, and the others. More cheering, more clapping. And then Deputy Ramos stepped forward with his phone in his hand, and a look that said Act 3 wasn't finished yet. Mrs. Melody Whitmore, he said, loud enough that the whole room leaned in. I need you to come with me. The DA had just issued a warrant, charges, embezzlement, fraud, elder financial exploitation. He read her rights in front of the entire community, cuffed her, and walked her past the people she'd been bleeding dry for years. The room went dead silent except for the tiny metallic click of the handcuffs and the whir of someone's phone recording. She looked at me as she passed, and I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just watched the consequences finally land. When the door closed behind her, the silence held for 10 long seconds. Then someone started clapping again, and this time it sounded like a release. A week later, the new board met for the first time. No gavels, no PowerPoints, just coffee, legal pads, and a pile of wreckage to sort through. Arthur was elected president. I took vice president because I could actually read contracts and spreadsheets. Kelly took community outreach. Harold volunteered to help rebuild the books with Linda at his side, lighter than I'd ever seen them. The forensic audit confirmed what we already knew, about $137,000 stolen. The DA froze Melody's assets. We clawed back $97,000, enough to refill reserves and start paying people back. Frank got his $300 for grass clippings. Mr. Kwan got his no money. We reversed every weaponized violation we could find, then rewrote the bylaws like we were designing a firewall. Mandatory published financials every month, recorded and archived meetings, member votes on any expense over $5,000, zero tolerance. For conflicts of interest, clear due process on violations, appeals built right in. We didn't want another tyrant. We wanted something almost radical, boring transparency. As for my land, that illegal road got ripped out, this time by a properly bonded contractor with current insurance, paid for out of recovered funds. We restored the soil, graded it right, seeded it, and then did something more. With the community's blessing, we planted 50 oak saplings across 5 acres, some on my land, some on HOA green space, and dedicated it as Desai Memorial Grove. We set a stone with words about kindness over cruelty and justice over silence. Vic stood there with his hand on the granite, Linda at his side, the winter wind tugging at the young trees. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like something good had grown out of something ugly. We used some of the recovered money to start the Desai Community Justice Scholarship, $5,000 a year for local kids going into elder law, social work, advocacy. The first recipient, Marcus Hill, had a grandmother who'd lost her home to a different HOA 3 counties over. He stood at a podium in a borrowed suit and said, "Nobody should lose their home because they can't afford to fight." And the whole room stood up almost before he finished the sentence. Melody eventually took a plea deal, 18 months in minimum security, 5 years probation, restitution that will stock her paychecks for a decade, her license revoked, her third husband gone. Last I heard, she's living with a sister in Greensboro, selling leggings in a multi-level marketing scheme on Facebook. Not exactly a movie ending, but close enough to karma for me. Life got quiet after that. The news trucks left. Sophie came home for Thanksgiving with her girlfriend. Rusty begged for turkey like his life depended on it. Luna watched the oven like it might attack us. Sophie looked at me over mashed potatoes and said, "You know you're kind of a badass, right?" And I laughed so hard I nearly choked because most days I still feel like a guy in worn boots who just wanted to drink coffee under an old tree. The funny thing is, our war ended up bigger than us. The state legislature used Maple Ridge as a case study when they tightened HOA laws, new rules for independent audits, easier recall procedures, stronger conflict of interest standards. It didn't fix everything. Nothing ever does, but it nudged the system a step closer to fair. Now when I sit on that porch, early spring air cool on my face, I can see the tops of those young oaks in Desai Grove starting to leaf out, Rusty snoring at my feet, Luna glaring suspiciously at a butterfly, but choosing not to bark. Personal growth. I get a text from Arthur about a meeting where the hottest topic is which playground set to buy. It's boring, it's normal, and after everything, that feels revolutionary. So here's the question I keep turning over, and I'm throwing it to you, too. If someone like Melody, backed by bylaws and money and fear, is crushing people in your community, how far should you go to stop them? Where's the line between justified revenge and going too far? And when the system itself is rigged, what does real justice even look like?